Good afternoon and welcome to the Polk County School Board's work session. We will now call the work session for September 9th, 2025 to order. School has now been in session for a month. The newness of the school year has worn off and it's time to buckle down and work hard to serve our students and staff. I want to thank our district staff in the back there who are available and accessible to help with any questions we may have. We are humbled to serve alongside you and the most highly educated and dedicated workforce in the nation. I would like to start by reading our Who Are We statement. We are the Polk County Leadership Governance Team. If we were to pick one phrase to define us, it would be student-centered, because when we come together to work, we lean on our diverse backgrounds and experiences to ensure that our decisions are focused on providing a high-quality education for all students. The four most important things to our governance team are operating with integrity, respecting our students, staff, families, and each other, establishing a culture where stakeholders feel valued, supported, and have opportunities for personal and professional growth, supporting an approach of continuous improvement to ensure student outcomes. Collectively, we need to work on behalf of the children we serve and find avenues of agreement so that we can govern the district in an effective manner. There is no acceptable alternative. We will always collaborate in a respectful manner in order to enhance opportunities for each student and staff members. We will not disparage others. Our students will thrive because we will remain committed to supporting the whole child. We hope to engage and empower our students and stakeholders to create a community of lifelong learners. At this time, I would like to turn it over to Superintendent Hyde to lead us in our work session today.
Good morning, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the board, members of the community staff. Thank you for being here. We have several topics for you this morning. I'll be kicking off with the screen time conversation. The initial intent was to work over the last few months to develop a policy, potential policy, for the board to consider based off of screen time. There are two handouts that you have that were placed at your seats. One is an outline that I'll soon go through. The second one is a comprehensive list of all Polk County Public Schools instructional materials, and I'll explain why that's relevant here in a moment. The research results that neither the state of Florida or the United States Department of Education nor the American Pediatric Association have established any standards or set expectations for the restriction of student use of devices, otherwise known as screen time. What they do, though, however, is highly differentiate between social use or personal use and instructional use. And when we talk about the use of devices for instructional purposes, there are some generic guidelines and recommendations that they provide. They can vary slightly based off students' ages, and arguably they would be developmentally appropriate. For example, in the early primary grades, typically in grades K through 2, the recommendation is no more than 20 minutes without then a break for the students to disengage with the device, do some other learning activity for reinforcement and or redirection, and then they can subsequently come back to the device. But again, it's important to note that there are no national standards nor are there any recommendations for screen time as far as actual minutes of usage during an instructional period. Instead, what we rely on is, okay, what are the best or most common practices or best practices that are out that we should be referring to and referencing. Part of what becomes difficult is we're still in the collection process. So the reason I provided you with this comprehensive list of our instructional materials is we are currently going back to all of our providers to identify if there's anything from the publisher that outlines specifically the need or what the recommendations are for utilization. So let me explain what that means. Because I think the way I just explained it's going to be a little bit muddy. Essentially what we've done is gone back to the publisher and said, if you have an online component, whether it's a lesson, an activity, some type of enrichment, some type of engagement, an assessment, what is the required amount of time that you find is needed for that assignment to be completed? or what's the recommendation for time being allotted so that students could complete that assessment or assignment within that specific lesson or period of time? What is going to be the requirement? So we're waiting to get responses on it. It's going to vary by grade level. Not all content has online materials or lessons. They always have an online component, but they may not necessarily have lessons or activities that are going to fall within what we're trying to do. So again, we fall back on what the research states, that essentially there are some best practices. I've provided a list of those for you. This will be an ongoing conversation, and then ultimately will be one where not only do we engage the board, but we'll gather feedback from our instructional staff, from our building principals, and from parents as well. But we do have to make sure that we start with an explanation as to what's expected for the curriculum, or what's needed for the curriculum to be effectively implemented if it relies on a technology aspect, right? So in a reading intervention course, it's not really primarily a concern in the primary grades, but it would be a concern when we start to get into secondary, where students are using online utilities such as iStation, or they're using an online utility such as Achieve 3000, where we're focusing on reading comprehension. And while there are typically books that go along with that, there is a portion of that that is electronic or digitally based. So we want to make sure that we're creating procedures. What I have basically arrived at is, at this time, I don't know that the recommendation is going to be to develop a policy in as much as procedures. And while the board historically does not typically, when the board outlines a policy, many times, as you're very well aware, it stipulates that the superintendent shall or superintendent must develop procedures to effectively implement the policy as stated. What the board does not typically include or has not required is for the superintendent to bring a procedure back to you. So in this case, to ensure that we're being fully transparent, the request would be, or the conversation that we're having with the board today is, I respectfully, I believe that should be the expectation of the board, and a request that once we develop those internal procedures and guidelines, that your expectation would be, you know, Mr. Hyde, what's the reasonable timeline in which we can see that? We'd like to see a draft brought back before the board and discussed, and then we can provide you with all of the additional relevant information. But again, you have a comprehensive multi-page kind of summary of what we were able to find. We also linked to here, as far as references, we provided you with all of Florida's standards as they relate to 21st century skills or technology skills. We also linked to other research and other places where, if you want to do your own review, for the purposes of further discussion and development of a procedure or influence on the procedure, wanted to make sure, again, we established that. On page 3, or page 4, excuse me, at the top of that page, it says best practices. I just want to go through a few of those. I've already mentioned a couple, but I just want to make sure that I cover those. The goal is to balance both digital learning and non-digital learning, to make sure that we're reinforcing concepts, but we're also providing students with a break. But if you look at the second portion of that best practices about mid-page, you see set age-appropriate screen time expectations. Not limitations, but expectations. Anything that we develop procedurally will not have a requirement for strict adherence, because we have to continue to provide our instructional staff with the ability to be flexible in what they're asking students to complete within the classroom setting. However, as a general rule here, what you see in early childhood, again, pre-K through second grade, is short intentional bursts of utilization, 10 to 20 minutes at a time, and then those students can engage in other activity and subsequently come back to that. There will be instances, for example, if the students are completing AR or completing something else, where they may actually require some additional time beyond that. So that's important to note. Elementary grades 3 through 5, the expectation is what we would do is encourage that students get a break every 20 to 30 minutes to step away from their screen. And then lastly, for middle school and high school, there's something called the 20-20-20 rule, that for every 20 minutes that they're online, they have to divert their gaze for at least 20 seconds and look someplace else for 20 seconds. That's included in here because I found it as part of the research when conducting this, but obviously we would clarify that further. I don't know that just saying the 20-20-20 rule, and I think we could most assuredly develop something more appropriate than that. We do need to make sure that we're incorporating the healthy use practices, and part of that is continuing to educate students and their parents on the difference between instructional utilization, again, and social use. Our students are not spending anywhere near the amount of time on instructional devices as they are on social media and on their phones, using it in a variety of different capacities. So the two are not synonymous with each other. And, you know, the issues, for example, such as screen time, or not screen time, excuse me, blue screens, and how that may be adversely affecting student sleep patterns, largely is outside of our control. That's not something we regulate outside of school. Those are typically done on personal devices, as you well know. But there is an emphasis here that we want to continue to educate families and our students on the importance for them to step away from a screen for at least an hour before going to bed, as difficult as that may be for some, to make sure that they're able to sleep and make sure that they don't have any further disruptions. So data privacy and safety obviously is something that we take very seriously here in Polk County. We have for a number of years. We continue to do so. Protecting our student privacy and their data is an imperative. Obviously, we need to continue to emphasize professional development. So once a procedure is developed and these expectations are established, it's imperative that we make sure that our staff understand them, and not just, hey, here's another mandate, here's another expectation, but we explain them as to the why this is beneficial to students, and then we can create some exemplars for our instructional staff so they understand the best way to incorporate it within their classroom. Again, I think sometimes when we establish an expectation and we send it out to our educators in the classroom without actually giving them some explicit examples of how to do something, they all value the what. It's the how. It's not the why, it's not the what. It's the how. How do I make this work in my classroom in a varied instructional setting where I'm doing small groups, individual learning, and whole group instruction? So it's important for us to make sure we spend some time focusing on those areas as well. And then the last part, obviously, I think is one of the most important on the next page, is the fact that as a school district, we need to have a continuous review and adjustment process to our procedures. It's going to take time. Curriculum will change. Intentionality will change as a direct result of that. So those are one of the things that we highlighted. Next sections that you have there, we outlined for you the state requirements for instructional minutes for the year, so that you understand how the minutes, if we were to come up with any recommendations in the procedures for instructional utilization of technology, how those then align with the state requirements for students as far as the instructional minutes that are required by statute. So I'll leave it at that, board members, and I'll open it up for any questions that you may have. Ms. Fields?
I'm sure you don't really have an answer right this minute, but it'd be interesting to know what practices we currently have in place, because I'm sure it's all over the place. Probably varies from classroom to classroom, I would imagine.
Yeah, I can answer part of that. I know we have not provided guidance on recommendations for breaks. I know that has not come out from us, but that would be something obviously we would want to incorporate. If a student's been on a screen for this many minutes, we've got to be intentional in giving them a break from that device, and that any use is instructionally aligned and not just we're playing on the computer during classroom instructional time. Right. Yes, ma'am. But Ms. Fields, to your question, I know Ms. Rouse is here. She'll take note, and we'll have some follow-up. We'll have a follow-up response as far as what our current practices are, if any.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Wyatt?
Thank you. And I'm hopeful that this will come back after we've had a little bit more time to review it, because 10 minutes is probably not enough to totally digest all of it. The one thing that really caught my eye, because obviously this is, for me at least, this is a much bigger concern for our younger students than it is our older students. There are so many studies out there that talk about the oversaturation of screen time in our youngest kids. 30 to 40 minutes per content area for a kindergartner seems really excessive, considering if you're doing math, science, English, and history, that where did those originally come from? If that's something that we're currently, is our daily technology time guideline?
No, we don't have we don't necessarily have that guideline, that
Okay.
specificity in our guidelines. The 30 to 40 minutes was based solely on, excuse me, was based solely on current practice and known variables. For example, knowing what supplements and curriculum we're using and what it takes to complete that lesson. I have water, sorry.
Okay.
And what, I have one, we're good. Yes, ma'am.
Take a sip.
Sorry.
We got all day.
So, for example, knowing what it requires presently for a student to complete a lesson or activity. Now, what you notice it doesn't say, because it is specific to the adopted curriculum, it was not intended to be a catch-all and assume that every content area requires that level of integration. That's why we're going back to the publishers for those other curriculum areas, for example, science, social studies, what components are there, what would be a reasonable amount of time, and then we can flesh this out further. These were just some general guidelines that we were able to find, again, based off those recommendations. And then what I just read to you a few moments ago would be, so even if students spent 40 minutes in a content area, after 20 minutes in grades pre-K through second, the student would be expected to have at least a 10-minute break, and then they could return back to that activity. It's also an average. In many instances, they'll probably spend 15, 20 minutes on an activity. But what we wanted to do was provide teachers the flexibility and the latitude that if they had students actually producing something, if they were doing something with animation, if they're doing something with a PowerPoint, if they're doing something to present to the class, or they're researching, and having to gather information, even as young as, I don't know that our pre-K students are doing that, but in those environments, as we're teaching those 21st century and those especially library media skills, it's important for us to have some flexibility in there. So what you would see later is we would add to the notes section as far as recommendations for how to do that. But it's not intended to say, we expect them to be on a device. So it's a good question. Thank you for allowing me to clarify. It's not that we're expecting them to be on 30 to 40 minutes per class all day long. That's just what should be allowed. And then how do we incorporate those brain breaks as we indicated before?
Well, and I would encourage us, especially for K-5, where they don't, it's harder in middle and high school where your science teacher and your English teacher probably haven't had a lot of communication that we're both going to be on a device for this period doing a lesson. But K-5, they typically have the same teacher or the same two teachers that finding a way to coordinate a minimum for the day, I think, is still important at that age. 4 content areas at 40 minutes each is really quickly, you've been on a device now for 3 hours, and I can guarantee you if you have a kindergartner on a device for 3 hours, they're not coming home in a pleasant manner, whether they're doing educational things or not. Looking at the full scope of the day, yes, I understand it's an average, but then let's truly spread it
you'll
out
see
throughout the
that.
week, not put it all in one day. That I think the way that it's currently worded in the guidelines, at least for the elementary level, may need to be clarified that the goal is an average for the day, not an average for each content area, for the week, not for each content area.
Yeah.
And then my last question, I think, was how are we utilizing this in curriculum adoption going forward? So is that becoming part of our process for curriculum adoption, is looking at how much of it is technology-based, how much of it is analog-based?
It has not been outside of the requirement that we have a digital copy of the text, because the intent to move away from a traditional text is you don't lose the license. So if you lose a device, you don't lose the license. You lose a textbook, you're out $200-300, and then that family has to reimburse us for that cost. Textbooks also very quickly, as states adopt new curriculum, new standards, they revise things, the content of a traditional text, becomes outdated very quickly. And then you're left with one or two choices. You either keep that text and make no changes to it and just trust that we're going to make notations as we go along that, okay, this is incorrect in it now, and please keep this in mind. Or there are insertions that you can buy that can replace pages in our text, but then it doesn't always stand up well. Wear and tear on books as well. So part of why we moved to the digital footprint was to eliminate a lot of those issues, plus storage and all these other factors, and weights and backpacks and all the things we used to hear about. Is my child's backpack's too heavy? But we can definitely make sure that outside of that initial requirement, that it's a digital, not a digitized, but a digital copy that's interactive and intuitive, that we could look to see if there are any supplemental components that staff will be using during instructional time. For example, those lessons, activities, enrichment, what's the typical duration of that, and does that fit within the standard that we've established?
And I think
So, yes, we can incorporate that.
That's what I would be more curious to. Obviously, having an online copy of the book is great, but I don't want it to be an iStation or something where they're literally just
Yes, ma'am.
going through a digital lesson all the time.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm sure I'll have more questions, but not
Yes,
today.
ma'am. Okay. This will be a reoccurring topic, as I mentioned at the start, because it's important that we keep bringing you back updates. And then this table in particular that has the instructional materials, I will continue to update. I'll add a column to it, and then there'll be notes off to the side for each one of those adoptions. Specifically back to your question, Ms. Wyatt, just a moment ago, is there a component in there, and if so, what does it require? The only thing we've ever noticed in the past was there were times with certain interventions in particular that there are breakpoints in it where if the student disengages from the lesson before a certain threshold, they lose the entirety of what they worked on. Now, we have, in the past, worked with the publishers to reset those. So instead of the students having to complete 60% of the lesson in order for it to trigger a save feature, we've worked with them to reduce that to 30 minutes, again, to make it more age and developmentally appropriate so they could actually chunk the assignment over time. But that's a lesson that we had to learn in real time when I implemented one-to-one previously. So those are things that we can work with the publishers on to make sure that that functionality, the save feature, so kids don't have to keep redoing the same lesson over and over, because I never get to a point where I actually get to where it triggers the save. We can definitely take care of that. Yeah, because that's a big point of frustration for families. As I worked with my child on this for 40 minutes last night, and it didn't save, and we've now had to redo it 3 times, and it still hasn't saved, and so we have to be attentive to those things. Yes, ma'am. All right, board members, next one is also mine. We have our turnaround option plans. I know that we have Ms. Collins and Mr. and Joe are here with us, Mr. McNaughton. Mr. McNaughton are here with us. They actually just left a state IR at 2 of our schools. So board members, you're all familiar with this because you've seen the turnaround option plans in the past. You may recall, I think, Mr. Sharpless, you came on the board a year after we had submitted the turnaround option plan for Griffin Elementary School. The school district had exhausted its turnaround options that are available to us. So in statute and in rule, under differentiated accountability, certain schools are required to implement certain aggressive turnaround strategies, transformation strategies, to move a low-performing school, especially when it's demonstrated a historical pattern of low performance. And so the first option that all districts utilize, along with ours, is district-managed turnaround. I think you'd all agree that the progress of what we've demonstrated over the last 4 years as far as exiting schools, improving student outcomes, those types of things is commendable, quite frankly, and I would argue unparalleled in most districts. But we still have to turn in a top plan. And the timing of the top plan, and the reason it's coming to you back to back, was we did not receive the final iteration of our top plan or the PowerPoints until just very recently. So the state has changed the process slightly. Previously, they would just provide you the template, we would send it back, but the department has integrated or implemented now several steps where they go through and they verify any data that we include. For example, when we were, if you recall, last year, we had to go to Destin to meet with the State Board of Education to request an extension of our district-managed turnaround plan. And we only requested that because we were able to show that the school had demonstrated significant improvement, just fell a few points shy. The state agreed, and they ended up approving an extension of our district managed turnaround, and lo and behold, at the end of the year, they improved to a C. So these are the types of things, but the state, because of that vetting process, it takes a little bit more time now for them to respond and return those to us. There's a back and forth that takes place. I did speak with staff from the Bureau of School Improvement at the Florida Department of Education over the last couple of weeks. As recently as just last Friday, I was on the phone working through and making sure that everything that we had was approvable. And then that's why it's coming to you back to back. Unfortunately, there are times, as you know, where mandatory reports and/or submissions aren't always perfectly aligned to our board meeting calendar, and we just have to make it work. So in this case, the turnaround option plans are for Crystal Lake Middle School and for North Lakeland Elementary School. The strategies that have been implemented at both schools are those that are proven turnaround effective strategies. We're meeting with the team today to finalize some other to address some other strategies to address staff vacancies. I'm not going to say much more other than that because, quite frankly, respectfully, we have to finalize the conversation today, and then I need to meet with PEA to get an MOU drafted so that we can go ahead and get that started. But outside of that, our coaches are there constantly, almost daily. We are supplementing vacancies with our own staff, so I'll go ahead and let Joe and Tracy summarize the rest. But to turnaround option plans, we'll be submitting those. They both are for district managed turnaround, and I don't anticipate there being any difficulty. This is a first-time submission for both schools, so we should be in a good spot. So, Ms. Collins, Mr. McNaughton.
So, good afternoon. Thanks for having us. Like Mr. Hyde said, we just left North Lakeland with the state team, and so we have probably the most current stuff that we can share with you as of this morning. And then tomorrow we'll be meeting with the state team again out at Crystal Lake Middle. Just in general, I'd like to share, as you well know, we have 5 schools that are Ds or labeled as Ds in the accountability realm. 3 of those schools are first-time Ds. And so we're supporting those through our PTO office, our transformation office. 2 of those schools are what we call top, which means that they've received 2 Ds, and those are Crystal Lake and North Lakeland. And so I am proud of, over the past 4 years, we have really worked on strategies to best support turnaround work while not just focusing on short game. It is a delicate balance between school grade change and trying to get them out of while also maintaining an eye on school improvement. School improvement is more sustainable. So part of what Joe's team and my team do is we support those efforts at this level. We watch what's going on, and then we know which levers we need to increase or decrease on to hopefully get the intended outcomes. Obviously, our first priority is to get these schools above a D and get them out of C range, but we will not abandon these schools after we do that because there's still much work to do around school improvement, and we want to look at sustainability. So we can go through this. I don't know how much we did go through the data with you guys before, but this is the current data. Across the board, we're low. We're low in proficiency at both of these schools. We're also low in learning gains. One of the main barriers that we've identified in both of these settings is what Mr. Hyde has said, vacancies, staff stability, and, simply the people we have on the ground at the schools, by and large, both of them are very committed to the kids of the school, whether that's the administrators, the long-term subs, the coaches, the interventionists. The only problem we have is we don't have enough of them. And so we want every student in there to have a highly qualified, certified teacher. And that's what we're working on, what Mr. Hyde alluded to.
Well, one thing I want to say about the instructional review today, it's just a microcosm of what Tracy just said, is that there had to have been 35 district people there at that school from all different departments, not just DOS, not just teaching, learning, but everything from federal programs was there. But it's just to make sure there's all available resources, whether it's financial, whether it's human capital, just to go ahead and give the principals and the schools what they need, and that's going to benefit the students.
Right. Along with not just our district team, over the past 4 years, we've forged, I think, a really good, healthy relationship with the Bureau of School Improvement. As a matter of fact, what they use in these, quote, state IRs is our model. They have allowed us to say, let's walk, let's use your tool, let's use your methods. That's unique to Polk County, and that really has grown out of a respect for what we do, the indicators we're looking at, and how they have seen that move student outcomes. And so today was a very good visit. We all are calibrated. We know the support that needs to come from BSI, because they do provide support, as well as our team, so that we are all aligned in our efforts at the school, and we're not causing undue stress on anybody, and that we're not sending separate messages. So, I don't know.
Let's see. This is what we already talked about. As Superintendent Hyde said, both of these are in year one. It's the district managed turnaround, and this is one of the other attachments that you all received for each school.
Again, if you want to look, priority hiring, they are involved with priority hiring. Tilly Kendrick and her team in HR, as well as Mr. Warren and his team in employee relations, understand that these two schools do take a different priority when it comes to recruiting, placing displaced teachers, if we were to have any of those, and making sure that they're signed up and supported through job fairs. So we are doing that. Full-time site-based coaches for English language, arts, and math, all of these schools. These are assurances that we give the state that we are providing as a district. So just to update you, yes, they do have the full-time coaches. We do have support from the senior coordinators. Because these schools fall within the PTO region, that means that Ms. Bennett and her team are focused on the instruction at that school. The operations are handled by Ms. Cangelos, because she is the regional, and that by dividing those two things, that gives Ms. Bennett the opportunity to not worry about all of the things operationally going on and really hone in on the instruction. And then Ms. Cangelos is supporting on the operational. And both teams, Ms. Cangelos and Ms. Bennett, have senior coordinators that are there on the ground working with those teachers.
Also for the attendance intervention support, and it really goes with the bullet ahead, and Ms. Barham over at North Lakeland, she has not only the senior coordinators there at her school, that is their office, but also attendance personnel. So there's that relationship, because that's one of her key features is working on attendance. Students can't increase performance if they're not there. And so having district staff on the campus, that is their home base, has really, that's one of her key really features that you'll see within the top plan.
One of the other assurances that we have made the state, and it's built into our school improvement plans, is this MOU that we leverage for our top schools and our turnaround schools. Again, we have 5 that affords us 1 extra planning day per week. As you may recall, schools really, by collective bargaining, only have 1 day of planning per week. This additional MOU gives us 2 days a week with these teachers to help support the planning and PLC process. So that's one thing that Joe and I, or Mr. McNaughton and I, have been supporting, is going out and actually participating and making sure that not only are we getting our return on investment and that we're actually doing those, which I'm happy to report that we are, but that how can we support that work to make that more impactful at the classroom level. So that is something that's going on. Obviously, instructional walkthroughs and monitoring, we do that in all of our schools, but there's an increased intensity. And that, again, includes us walking together and independently with the school leaders alone. Again, what we don't want to do is not be calibrated, and the people there seeing stuff that's maybe not happening, or seeing missing things that are happening, and so we continue to support them through their walks.
One thing that we've started this year is that we started asking the schools, what do you expect our numbers to be? And so they're actually using the tool, and we can actually calibrate. And actually today was rather close of what they thought they would see and what we did see. So we're making sure that, as you talk about the calibration, if we don't keep on monitoring that, and if we don't have calibration, they're going to think they're doing great, and they're may not, or vice versa. So again, that open communication and then how to make real-time adjustments on it. And the last, the district mentors for new teachers. We both have that through teacher recruitment, helps with teachers that have their education certificates. We also have teachers that are new to the field of education, never went through an internship. That's through professional development. That's with the full release mentors. So we have support on both ends at the schools.
Mr. Sharpless.
Are you guys done?
We can be.
We can
yes.
be. For you.
I have a comment and a question. So my comment is, I think this starts all the way at the top. Superintendent Hyde, I know when I was on the citizen screening committee looking at all the 52 applicants for the superintendent, one thing that really stood out to me in your resume was your experience in school turnaround at the state level. And so it starts, again, district culture starts with you, goes down, great leadership here, and I think that speaks highly of how we've improved the schools, especially the lower performing schools, and turned them around. The fact that we only have 2 of these, I think is I mean, we don't want any, obviously, but the fact that we have 2, we obviously an area to focus on, right? So just as Mrs. Fields would say, it's a poor frog that don't croak for his own pond, right? So y'all have done a good job. One thing that I know that Lee County has done, this is a question, and I know this would have to be bargained, is they've offered incentive pay for hard to fill positions. And I know that has to be bargained with PEA, but when we talk about stability, we talk about that being a major factor in school performance, and you've identified today. Would that be potentially a recommendation from you and I guess the superintendent that I know we have to bargain it, but to help maybe with the stability would be potentially incentive-based pay?
I'll let Mr. Hyde speak to that.
I mean, again, this is what I alluded to earlier, so I'm not going to say much more beyond that. But the only thing is that's a mixed bag.
Okay.
I have to say that, again, given my experience. There are districts that have mandated high-performing teachers to move into low-performing schools, and the success is a very mixed bag. Teacher retention rate is not going to be high. So, for example, in Orange County, when they did it a number of years ago, and they incentivized teachers to move to lower-performing schools because they had higher student outcomes, there was minimal impact, and then the staff turnover was fairly consistent because as soon as they had completed their time at that school, they left and went back to the other school. Not all teachers are meant to teach all students. It's not because they don't have the capacity, but all of us connect differently with different populations of our students. And so I don't think it's a fair assumption sometimes, and I know that's not what you're saying, but there are people out there who would say, well, just put your highest performing teachers in with your lowest performing kids. It doesn't work like that all the time. That's a very unique skill set to work with struggling students for a lot of reasons, both social, emotionally, behaviorally, academically. But that is, again, we're having those conversations right now, and I'll leave it at that.
And so then will we be presented ever with opportunities, and what strategy we will use to incentivize stability? I'll just put it at that, not necessarily even pay, but how do we tackle the problem? I guess that's my bigger.
Yeah, so after our meeting today, the board will receive an update, and we'll go ahead and begin the process of negotiating and bargaining an MOU with our collective bargaining unit leadership, Ms. Yoakum and others, to make sure that we've got a comprehensive plan in place. You can't just, you mentioned something earlier, and I just want to make sure I clarify. This is not a hard-to-hire area. This is a hard-to-hire school. And there's no way to differentiate between the two or to use the same practices for a hard-to-hire position at a hard-to-hire, hard-to-fill school. So we're going to do something very different. But whatever we propose will have to impact all staff. It can't be limited to just, well, we have a third grade vacancy, can we do something there? And I'm probably saying more than I should right now, but it has to apply to everyone, because part of this is teacher retention too. So yes, sir, you will see a proposal, you'll see various proposals actually. The funding is not something that comes from the general allocation. We are very fortunate in Polk County that we will be receiving some additional funding from the Florida Department of Education that we can specifically use for this strategy. So we will have no net costs to the district, and these dollars are meant to do things just like this. So we're in a good place with that. And again, you'll see that very soon.
And just, again, thank you for all the hard work in the turnaround schools. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Are y'all done?
They were just going, actually, the presentation that they're reading from is the presentation I will actually give to the State Board of Education in September. So, but the last slide was the most important one, Ms. Fields, which is what's the district doing specifically to support those schools. So yes, ma'am, they're at the end, so if you have any questions. Ms. Fields.
I didn't want to be interrupting what you guys were presenting. I'm going to be very mindful about my comments because I understand what the superintendent is speaking of as far as bargaining some of this. In my viewpoint, as it relates to North Lakeland, and having been around for a minute, and I've mentioned this to Superintendent Hyde as well, I think it has been an opportunity and a challenge when leadership changes. And I know some of the leadership changes had to happen. You didn't have any control over that. So I think stability is going to be very, very important at North Lakeland and probably at Crystal Lake Middle as well. But I can only speak right now about North Lakeland. I think getting feedback from the staff, honest feedback on what they think that they need, and including the family engagement folks on getting the families somehow involved, because I think it's a very unique situation at North Lakeland.
Very unique.
It's a great school, and there are so many committed employees there, and I think they have just been beat down, and they have got to be lifted up. So I don't know what the answer is. I don't have it right this minute, but I know that with the leadership that we have and with the team, Ms. Berrien is going to do a great job there, but she cannot do it alone. We want to make sure that we support her and her team, and she doesn't just get beat down, and then we have a opportunity for another leadership there. So that's just my take on that.
I appreciate you saying that because you're 100% right. I will tell you, I will make two comments. One, the spirit out there today was really pretty amazing. Just things that a lot of people overlook. She doesn't. School identity. You know, they've been the navigators. The question was, what's a navigator? And people didn't know. So they came together as a staff. Now they have a mascot. He's so cute. The media specialist crocheted the little Navi the navigator. So the kids are all on board. There's just a different spirit on campus. And, you know, is it because Miss Berrien understands turnaround work in schools? Maybe. But is it because she has a passion for what she does? 100%. The only other thing I can tell you is, to your point, when we're firm believers, when we have high expectations, and these are really high expectations because, to your point, this school has kind of, there has to be an equal or more increased level of support. So I can't just have high expectations without the support. And so our goal really every day is to make sure all of our schools, but particularly these two schools, the teachers, the staff, and in particular, the administrators feel the support. And when they don't, they know exactly what they need to do to get an immediate response. So.
And the other thing that I would say, I looked at the goals for this year, and I think that all things are possible. I just hope and pray that we're not putting too much pressure and stress on the staff, going from a very low percentage to what is an acceptable percentage, if that makes any sense. So, because I don't want them to ever feel like they have failed because they did not meet. Because if you look at some of the percentages, to me, it's relatively high. But I know we have high expectations. But again, I think that goes back to making sure that we provide them with the support, with the staffing, and everything that they need in order to be successful.
Correct. And the one thing I will say about the goals, they are lofty goals, but particularly when you're working with a very small school like North Lakeland, those big swings are not easier to make, but because your denominators in each of your grade cells are so small. For instance, we talked about science today. They only have 80 kids. That's about 1.2 percentage points per student in the 5th grade. And so when you start to break it down and you look at students and all those things, that's part of the school grade change mentality. And those are things that when you break it down, teachers go, I can do that. I really need to get to know my kids and where they are and how they're moving. But when you just say from 20% to 60%, that sounds like a whole lot. And so those are things that we're working on, just kind of the data literacy pieces as well.
And there's some shared belief, because it wasn't just the principal, I mean, just working in isolation. It's really a communal, there was a different feel out there today. And I think that's hard to measure, but it's there. When you see them all wearing shirts and it was all proud of the school, I mean, the pride that was there. And I think that's one thing that is understated, is the pride they have in the school and making that better and making it the best school for their students. And I think that was evident today.
Okay. There are no further questions or comments. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Board members, the next item is the proposed rule development for school board policies. Board members, you received communication from me earlier today. An item was removed, policy update was removed after further discussion with Mr. Green. He found some relevant case law in another state at the federal level that he believes could create some conflict, but additionally, you have existing board policy that already addresses this to a certain extent. I find it more problematic than actually a new policy, because I think it's very ambiguous and it's going to require a lot of work on our behalf to make sure. I don't believe that there are existing procedures around them, so I'm going to have to go back, revisit that board policy and address that. And unfortunately, it puts the onus on my office to make the determination as to who's allowed, who's not allowed. Mr. Green and I are still in conversation now about defining instructional time. You know, and I know at least two of you have asked me, well, what does that mean for lunchtime? Well, right now there's discussion about whether or not that's considered instructional time. Other school districts, and I know you talk to your colleagues, Orange County, for example, has set the standard that no one's allowed to visit during the day, and that these groups or individuals are only allowed to visit before school or after school as part of a club or an activity. And that requires parental consent and parental permission in accordance with the policies and legislation that passed years ago. So I just wanted to provide a little bit more clarification and address that, and then we can come back to that in questions if need be. But Mr. Green, I saw that I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add to that or.
Just on the point of instructional time, I did a quick search of the education bill. It's not defined as far as, you know, what that means. So reasonable minds could differ on, is that during the school day? Is it during school hours? Is it during math class? That sort of thing. But happy to work with staff council on developing some procedures to kind of further define what the parameters are so that we're in line with the current policy.
All right, Ms. Griffin, having said all that, it's all yours.
School board members. We have 10 bylaws. These are your school board bylaws that we are bringing for rulemaking today. And I'll just go through them all. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to jump in. The first one is bylaw 100, which is the definitions. And that's just, this isn't based on any recent legislation. It just modifies a few of the definitions in the policy. Bylaw 124, Standards of Ethical Conduct, is revised to incorporate provisions from Senate Bill 348 regarding stolen valor. And then there's some additional revisions regarding self-reporting requirements that aligns with the principles of professional conduct for the education profession. Bylaw 131, which is our legislative and policymaking bylaw. It's revised to incorporate rulemaking notice requirements from state statute, and it also includes amendment to the content and publication requirements for notices, so it's all around notice for rulemaking, like what we're doing today. Bylaw 131.01, technical corrections. It incorporates a new definition of technical change, and then it also includes options for when a technical correction may be made to policies. I didn't say this at the beginning before I started today, but myself, Mr. Green, and Mr. Davis sat down to go through all of these, and so for some of the ones that had options, we went through and selected options for you. So the one that for technical corrections that we selected in there is the way that we currently handle policies that just have a technical correction. We put it on the consent agenda if it's just like a name change for a department or a spelling error or things that aren't like substantial to the policy. Bylaw 143.1, residence areas. This is from Florida Statute 1001.361. And so it's just providing clarity around defining the residence areas for school board members. And then there's also 3 legal references added to that policy. Bylaw 164, notice of meetings, is incorporating language from Florida statutes regarding the method for providing public notice for regular meetings, hearings, and workshops. And then our last group of policies are our meeting policies. So in order to streamline the policies related to board meetings, Neola is suggesting rescinding bylaws 165.2, 165.3, and 166, and putting that into 165. So previously we had a bylaw for meetings, and then a bylaw for regular meetings, a bylaw for special and emergency meetings, and then a bylaw for exempt meetings. And so this takes all of that language and puts it into our meetings policy. And there's also a few legal references that were added to the policy. Those are all the revisions for today. Does anyone have any questions?
Ms. Fields?
Superintendent Hyde, I want to thank you and Mr. Green for working together on the policy that was pulled, because there was no way I was going to support that. I think it's very challenging for anyone to define what a patriotic organization is. There's so many organizations in our community and our county that's doing great things, and to me to just identify 9. And I know it's not anything that we're doing as a body, but it's a part of, so just thank you for pulling that. I really appreciate that.
Yes, ma'am. And Mr. Green deserves the credit for having found a federal case to substantiate the fact that that is difficult, because there was a case, and we can share that with you offline, that seemed very clear-cut to me, but I was surprised to see the ruling from the federal courts saying, oh, no, that's considered a political group. I find that interesting, especially given the nature of the group. So patriotic, sorry, not political, patriotic. Given the nature of what that group, how they're embodied, right, and what their focus is. So it seems that there's no win in that, and it's going to require a great deal of conversation to figure this piece out. You do have a long-standing policy, but I think Mr. Green and I would agree, as would others, that it has not been defined procedurally, and it has resulted in, at times, things having taken place that we now need to rectify. And so when you hear that a change happens, and this will come back before the board, but when you hear that there are changes and that we're being more restrictive, we should have been all along. And so it's not that we're changing per se, but we are adhering to your adopted policy that is dated well before 2014. 2014, in fact, was the most recent revision, or the first revision, and then there were 6 subsequent revisions after that, all the way up through 2022 or 2023, and that one was a language revision, but there had been subsequent revisions all along the way, as we normally do, right, based off legislative changes or recommendations from Neola. So it'll be an ongoing conversation. It's Mr. Green, myself, Mr. Davis, and Ms. Griffin will need to spend a little bit more time reviewing the existing policy and then making sure that, we create a procedure that can be adhered and applied in the best possible scenario or set of circumstances. So thank you, Ms. Fields.
Sure.
Ms. Miller.
I just want to follow up with what Ms. Fields was saying, and I had reached out to Mr. Green. I'm sorry I wasn't able to follow up with you again, but a little context to this. In the past, we have changed the policy, even for people who would come in to talk to our high school students about voting. They were no longer allowed in the classroom. To encourage people to register to vote, they had to go to the library or to the lunchroom. So I've watched it evolve over the years. I had a lot of problems with what we were presented only because it was so ambiguous, and it would leave it open to staff having to update it all the time. I don't want us to far reach into, they leave it, I'm not going to say it's left vague on purpose, but I want to believe that some of it is left vague so districts can interpret it for what's best used for their county. We have community groups, we have faith-based groups that go in during lunch. We have groups that meet that help feed our kids. And so I don't want to overstep. As you're reviewing things, I don't want to overstep in trying to start limiting people because what we believe the law to be or the rule change to be. I think we need to look at what we've done in the past, when it's historically worked for Polk County. When legislation is made, it's made, for the entire state. That's my answer a lot of the time when I'm talking to our delegation members. And so obviously there was a reason for them to do this. We have not had an issue here, and I don't want to create one just because we have to be, because of how we interpret what's been handed to us. So I'll look forward to the conversation that you all have, but I do not want to limit our community from supporting our students. And that, to me, this felt like it could do that. But we'll see, and looking at what other districts are doing, I think is important. Thank you.
Ms. Wyatt.
I have 2 points, and I hate when I go after Ms. Miller and have to agree with her on everything she says, but they're very similar to Ms. Miller's, that we have several groups that have been supporting our campus for years and years, and I want to make sure that we're taking into consideration as we're developing procedures how to continue to allow the community and to support our students. Whether that's things like Great American Teach-In, that typically happens during instructional time. How are we continuing to allow groups how are we avoiding limiting student opportunities that happen during the day? Because the reality is we have a lot of students on our campus that they have to catch a bus home, and there's no way they're going to be able to come early or stay after for special events, even for things like college visits. And, how are we giving students access to those opportunities? I appreciate and understand managing the risk, but I don't want us to get so caught up in trying to avoid any risk that we eliminate opportunities for students.
Well, and I'll clarify, there's no one trying to manage the risk. I'm the one that kept insisting the policy come back and we expand the list to be more inclusive. But based off Mr. Green's findings and based off comments from the board, I pulled the item because it's very clear. But so there's no one trying to manage the risk. In fact, if anything, we were opening it up, and that's what created more concern on the behalf of the legal department, but we're not always going to agree. Because I'm going to look at it from the perspective of how do I manage a district and how do I continue to ensure exactly what you're asking for can take place. But in the context of that legislation, and going back to the initial conversation, the board did not object to the policy at all. The board objected to a restricted list that the federal government provided. And I provided some really good examples during that last meeting when we had this discussion. And God bless the Marine Corps. I mean that wholeheartedly as a son of, parents who were in the military and active and served, and family members that served in the Marine Corps and in the Navy and, different branches. How is it the Marine Corps was the only group included on the list? I think that's what concerned me. But what I do also want to clarify, though, is in the absence of my knowing that we had a pre-existing policy, that policy is restrictive. And we've not been adhering to it. So it's going to get more restrictive before it loosens up again, because we've got to establish now the procedures to substantiate how we're making the decision as to whether or not a group's allowed in or not. And quite frankly, as I mentioned before, this is not what we're recommending. It's not what my office is recommending. But other school districts have gotten to the position where, like, you know what? We're not going to get in the habit or in the business of trying to differentiate between groups. We're simply saying you can't come in during the instructional day. And now, whether or not they included the cafeteria as non-instructional time, I don't know. We'd have to go back and look at that. But we do want to make sure, and I'm not opposed to restricting many of the groups that are in our schools. But the rule and the policy is the policy, and I've got to enforce it and then work backwards from there. But we'll bring something back to you as soon as possible, and I'll keep the board updated, as I do with regular updates, as to any progress we're making or any suggested language, so that you can stay abreast of it and it doesn't have to come all to you in a package at the end of October. I don't want to wait another month to get something to allow us to allow groups into our schools if that's the direction or recommendation we're going to land on. So.
And I just want to clarify, I am thrilled that the policy came off, because that is not something I would have been supportive of. However, I greatly appreciate any updates that, especially if there's letters or things going out to our schools or communities in the meantime of these groups are all of a sudden not allowed, if we can be copied on those or at least receive a copy of those so that we're hearing about it from the district and not at Publix,
Yeah,
it would
we'll meet after the.
greatly
Well,
appreciated.
not after today, but we'll meet sometime this week and draft some communication to provide clarification to families and our partner groups and to our school leadership.
And a timeline, I think, too, would be helpful, just as
will
we're getting it
Do
cleared
the
up.
best we can.
The other, I also, and this is, sorry, I know you've been standing there for a really long time, Teresa. For policy, where's the number? 0143.1, the residence areas.
Okay.
I believe that state statute changed in the middle of while we were revising our last ones, that it used to be odd number years, and now it goes to so many days before an election cycle that you can change them. But I know that it changed from whatever it was in 2009, like in the middle of us redistricting.
Okay.
So if we can just get clarification that we're, whatever we have, and it doesn't necessarily need to say what the rule is, but as long as we're aligned to what state law is. Because I think that it changed. I know when we were trying to get it done before the end of 2023, I think it was 2023, that it was, we found rule that the law changed so that it was so many days before an election, so we got a little bit of an
So
extension.
you're not referring to anything that's
No,
the
it's the
new
part,
language, it's
the
the
part
old
in the
language,
old
the
language,
first
I think has
paragraphs.
changed
Okay.
since
I will
we
check on
last
that.
adopted it.
Okay.
And I can try and find the state statute, but if we can make sure that policy's aligned to what the state statute is now.
Yes, ma'am. I will check into that. And just to provide clarification on next steps for these, tonight, Mr. Green will ask for authority to advertise. These would be public hearing in October, October 28th. So I will check on that, and anything else that's discussed today, those revisions will be made before public hearing.
Thank you.
Ms. Miller.
I think I lost my question, but that's okay. I'll come back to it.
Okay.
It was about what we were discussing earlier. With us talking about a legislative update, if this is something that needs to be revisited, like we often do to legislation that's been passed, we need to have that discussion soon so we can include it. If this is something that we can give our opinion on, hopefully that they may be able to clean up with legislation regarding the visitors to schools, they may need to hear from us through that update. So I would encourage us to think about that if it's truly going to be an issue for us having to create something. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Griffin, there are no further questions or comments.
Thank you.
Thank you. Board members, the next item that we have is the purchase of the Lake Marion site for district development in Northeast area. This is for land banking purposes for a proposed high school in the future. And we have Mr. McLemore.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair, members of the board, Superintendent Hyde. So I really am actually going to be mindful of your time this afternoon and just focus on the two main items that were mentioned during the last time you saw this item, and they related to traffic concerns and soils concerns. So the presentation that was included with the work session agenda item pretty much is identical, except we added some additional information regarding soils and traffic. So with that, I'm going to move forward and just focus on those items in terms of soils. So the question came up, well, what are the soils? Are they conducive for development? And by and large, they are conducive for development. Those areas that were outlined in red where we see our prior map look, very disheartening, but those are as it relates to a rating if you were relying on septic and drainage. However, all state laws now require that school campuses and facilities, new ones, have to be on centralized water and wastewater. So any new school that would be, or facility that would be located here would be connected to centralized water and wastewater. They would still have to apply with all stormwater management design criteria as mandated by the South Florida Water Management District, based off of your 100-year stormwater event and the outfall related to it. So, and those areas that are really not conducive for it are those where all the wetlands are existing, and those pretty much you can easily identify by the massive tree line. And lastly, there was concerns regarding traffic. Following the last workshop session that we had, reached out to the county. The director for the Polk County Roads and Drainage, Director Jay Jarvis, did share with us that the county they've already started the design work and re-engineering to realign Lake Marion Creek Drive. Pretty much, if you look on the map shown before you, pretty much where you see that red D1 where the road begins taking that southwest jog, the county is envisioning realigning that and having it directly tie in to the county roadway there, and it would actually become a signalized intersection. And with that, I stand for any further questions or comments or concerns you may have on this particular item.
This item is not up for a vote this evening, board members. This is informational only. Mr. Sharpless?
So I'm looking at the soils report. It looks like, most of this is fine sand, which is great. But that, where the 13s are, that is Samsula muck. And so that would be our wetlands area. It says it's only 13% of the whole acreage. So it looks like about 87% then would be buildable.
Yes, that is correct, sir.
All right, thank you.
Ms. Fields?
Thank you. I'm looking at the last part of the slide. It says, will a high school fit? And it says possibly. And so my question is, what if it doesn't fit?
So when staff first started this process, and again, we've been in discussions with the property owners for well over a year now. And at that time, no final decision had been rendered regarding where we were going to site a new high school in this area. So some of the analysis that we were reviewing in terms of looking at this property is, again, without actually investing dollars and actually getting engineered drawings put on the ground, what we did was a rough analysis of pretty much 2 scale drawings of taking Davenport High School and seeing if we could fit the key components of our high school on this site, and they do. But again, that's relying on pretty much aerial photography. That's before we start getting into engineered drawings and designs. And again, that is the most intensive use that a school district would have for a piece of property. So we did our analysis on the most intense use that we could foresee being sited on this property.
And I think another part of that answer, Ms. Fields, is while slated potentially for a high school site, it could become a K-8, it could become a 612, it could become any number of things. Part of, I think, what we were looking at, Josh, remind me if I'm wrong, or correct me if I'm wrong, part of this was we would use a portion of it for another site for our facilities and maintenance team to have supplies stored and equipment stored to better facilitate their access to that side of the school district. So there are a number of uses, and so what we initially label it for, as you well know, Ms. Fields, could change 15 times between now and the time we go to build. We do, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Mr. McLemore, there are no further questions or comments. Thank you, sir, for coming back. Board members, if you have any further questions following this meeting, please let me know. Please let Mr. McLemore know. He has been incredibly responsive, and since I have you at the microphone, I am going to take the opportunity, Mr. McLemore, to praise you and your team. I have heard nothing but amazing things about the community forums that we are providing. Unfortunate that we've not seen greater attendance. Hopefully, we'll see some change, and we'll see what the virtual attendance looks like as well in the future. But at the end of the day, it's not for lack of effort. It's not for lack of communication. It was on every major news outlet. It's been in social media. It's been in every print option here, the Ledger and others. And respectfully, but what I've heard from members of the community who come back to me and see me at other events, they said that your team was very well prepared. The information was easy to digest, and they appreciated all the resources. I've heard similar comments from board members who have been in attendance as well. So I don't get an opportunity to praise you very often publicly, so I wanted to make sure I didn't miss this one. So thank you for all the hard work you guys are putting in, because this is, as you know, a very difficult topic and one that can become very easily hyper-emotional, but you've managed it very well, so thank you.
Good. We have a great team, and we really appreciate that, sir. Thank you.
All right. Board members, the last item up on the superintendent's report, although I'm going to take a little bit of liberty after this item and talk about item B4, if I may, or excuse me, sorry, not B4, D3, to provide further clarification. You may recall an email about it, but I want to go ahead and address it while we're here. So for Zen City, if I could get Mr. Geary and his team, who's coming up? Ms. Crowley, Mr. Geary.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair and board members and Superintendent Hyde. Thanks for the opportunity to be here today to talk about our Zen City partnership and where we're currently at. You may recall that over in the spring retreat, we talked about our new partnership with Zen City. Zen City basically is a company that is going to help us to do more intensive surveys that will allow us to get community feedback and help us guide decisions that our district is making on various initiatives and help us to better target our stakeholders and better utilize our communication tools. There are three, just as and I'll do a real quick summary of just the three tools that we have as part of this partnership. The first one is called the Engage Partnership. We're going to talk about that the most this afternoon. That is basically like a survey tool that we can have as many surveys as we would like through that. It's a very simple system to use, and we have I think we've done 2 different surveys and gotten some pretty good feedback on them, and now we're ready to move on to a more intensive, more in-depth survey. We wanted to talk with you about that before we launch that. The Organic tool is basically a monitoring tool for social media, and it also helps us to be able to look at various news articles and things. It helps us to basically get a sense of what kind of feedback is out there in social media and online. It helps us to weigh and kind of see where things are going. We mentioned the rezoning issue that for our high schools. We've been able to look at that, and as stories and things have come out, we've been able to gauge whether or not the coverage has been positive or whether it has been negative or neutral. So it's been very helpful for things like that, and it will continue to be so. The Pulse survey is the last thing we'll talk about this afternoon, and I really needed some guidance from you on that. There are actually only 8 different surveys we can do through the Pulse tool. It's a much more intensive, much more complex survey. It actually is something that the company Zen City takes a lot more hands-on approach to designing it and helping us with it. They have their statisticians and their folks there that actually will target specific demographics, and it's a much more scientific way. It's less like a survey where folks can volunteer to take it, and they're actually seeking out people to take it through mobile devices and things like that. The Engage tool is what we'll talk about mostly this afternoon. This is basically a tool that we can use as many times as we would like. We're very mindful of survey fatigue. Obviously, folks are very busy, and we don't want to bombard them with surveys. At the same time, there are various ways that we can use this tool, both at the school level and at the district level, and we've kind of sampled and done 2 surveys with that to kind of get some familiarity with it, and now we have a larger district-wide survey that we would like to launch. It's the closest thing to a climate survey that we haven't done for several years, so this would be what we're talk about this afternoon is the closest thing to that, but specifically designed towards our strategic plan, and in particular trying to get actionable ways or feedback from the community on ways that we can improve as a school district. Again, we talked a little bit about the monitoring tool. It's been very helpful. We are getting used to using it. It's been really very nice for the rezoning issue. We are able to develop reports. We can work with different departments if they would like to gauge feedback on various initiatives that they're doing. And the pulse survey is the final tool where we would really like some guidance on how you would like to use the very limited 8 surveys that we can do through a 24-month period. The Engage survey is the one that we've used the most so far lately. A very small one would be for Lena Vista Elementary. When they did their rebranding, we were able to set up a very quick survey and be able to gauge the community support or opposition to their branding. It was overwhelmingly in support of it, and it was a very simple survey to be able to put up. The other one that we've done is a school choice showcase survey. We provided those results over to the folks who have been planning those so that they can kind of look at that with their efforts as they go forward. Both of them were very easy to set up, and we felt like it put us in a good position to be able to move on to this larger phase, this bigger engagement survey that Ms. Crowley is going to talk about now, and the process that was in place for putting this larger engaged survey together.
Thank you, Jason. Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. As Jason mentioned, we're going to go into a little bit more depth about the public perception survey, which is one of our engagement surveys, which we're going to be launching soon. So just to recap, it is based on the 5 strategic goals of the strategic plan, and so you can see them there. But it's also, the purpose of it is to help us better engage with our students, preparing them for the future, engage with our community too. So this survey would help us to make improvements, but I'll show you the creation and the timeline. The team has spent a lot of time working on it and crafting the questions, and we've gotten feedback so far about that. But we've been working very closely with Zen City, getting their feedback, our committee's feedback, our goal leads feedback as well. And then our district advisory council has also given us feedback too. But the goal of this survey is to gather the feedback but keep it open for the entire year. So you'll see in a little bit, the timeline would be launched in September and then would close in April. So it would give our community, all of our stakeholders, opportunity to share their feedback with us. So the creation of the survey, the strategic plan goal leads were involved in this process, along with a Zen City team providing feedback, along with our committee also providing feedback. They submitted questions, so we have different stakeholder groups here. So approximately 10 questions for each stakeholder group, but we'd have students, we'd get their feedback, 4 through 6, 7 through 9, grade 7 through 9, and then 10 through 12 and adult learners. Our teachers and staff would be able to provide feedback. Our parents, grandparents, guardians would provide feedback. And then our community members would also be able to provide feedback. We will have this survey, like I said, available throughout the year, but it would be in multiple languages as well. So in addition to English, it would be Spanish and Haitian Creole as well. Data will be collected and pulled on a quarterly basis and reviewed by the teams. When the creation of the questions were drafted, we wanted this to be actionable. So what can we take action on as a district and make improvements on? So that's from the questions that we created, that's what our thinking was, is we want this, how can we improve and how can we do better as a school system? Here's a sample list of questions. Now, like I said, there was about 10 questions per stakeholder group. So we just wanted to give you just a sample, an idea of what some of the questions that we've created for the survey. They're all aligned to the strategic plan in each goal. So they'll each have questions for each stakeholder group on the survey. As I mentioned, the team's been working quite a bit of time on this. With the Zen City team, we've been working with our survey team, and we've also been working with our goal area leads team. You can see here, we've gotten feedback from each of these areas and then updated the survey questions based on the feedback. DAC, you can see here, we piloted it with our group there, and they provided some really good feedback for us because we want to make sure that the community is understanding of the questions. Like, we know the intent of the questions, but we just want to make sure from their feedback, so they're such a diverse group of individuals for us, and so we just wanted to make sure that they understood the questions, and then their feedback that they gave us, we implemented some changes into the draft questions. Jason's going to go over the communications plan. Do we have any? Good? Okay.
You can see from the timeline, the ideal goal would be to launch the survey next week if possible. One thing we do want to take an effort to do, the survey can be translated, as Jeanette mentioned, into Spanish and Haitian Creole, but that is an auto translation. So what we would like to do is take the extra step of having the ESOL department actually test it and take it. We've spoken with them, and they're more than happy to do so. It's mainly just to make sure that everything translates well enough so that we can get good, actionable feedback from folks. The communications plan, there's a couple different pages of these. Some of these are various techniques that we've used for lots of other campaigns. I'm not necessarily going to go through all of them in there, but basically a lot of these, whenever we're ready to launch and go, the majority of these would be something that we would do initially. A key thing would be, as Jeanette mentioned, this is going to stay open so we can continue to get feedback quarterly on it. We would continue to do reminders and do some of these tools throughout the course of those quarters so that we continue to try to get folks who haven't responded to respond. The final thing I wanted to just mention was the pulse surveys. So as we've been talking with our Zen City team, they've been anxious to try to move forward with the 8 pulse surveys that we have. Again, these are much more intricate, much more complex surveys. They take 5 to 8 weeks to basically to do. So they do take some time to put together. They're up to 20 questions. And basically, this is different than the Engage surveys in that you can't volunteer to take it. They're actually seeking out various demographic groups and targeting them so that they can try to get as much of a representative sample as possible. Because there is a limited amount of them, only 8 over the 24-month period of our partnership, we wanted to get some feedback on how you wanted to perhaps be able to use these. Some ways that you could use them, and again, this is new territory for us, but you could get, for instance, you could get feedback on budgeting priorities. If you wanted to seek out that kind of data, you could do that. For specific initiatives or programs, if you wanted to gauge support or opposition to certain programs or initiatives. Those are the kinds of things that you can use for this. You could theoretically take the public perception survey that we have right now and try to convert that into a pulse survey so that you have both a volunteer-based one where people are taking it, but also one where they're seeking out that information. If you think that those 2 data sets would be useful for your consideration.
Ms. Miller.
Thank you for sharing today. I think when we first discussed this, my biggest priority was this district is very large. We are housed in Bartow. We are growing most quickly in the Davenport, Haines City area. And so when we reach out to the community, the places that feel less connected to us sometimes don't show up to give us that return of their thoughts and opinions on how we're functioning. So I thought this would be a great way. I enjoyed the fact that you explained all these options. I had no idea you were working this many avenues. But this is a way not only to get information, but to educate. I think that's very important. You mentioned budget. And I think the audience, we want to make sure we're reaching a variety of people through the community, not just our parents, but our community partners and just citizens in general who may be retired and not involved in our school system. So I don't have a lot of opinions right now on what that needs to look like. I'd love to see the results of what you've done with this presentation has been helpful. But I think this is an opportunity for us to really target the people that are involved day to day that have students in our system and what they're looking for, and then the business community for what they're wanting to receive as these students graduate out. This district is large, and I don't know that we've been able to capture that in the past. So I'm interested in learning more about how we can target these. And I just want to make sure that we are trying to gather information from every subgroup that we have, every learner, to have that total picture. I appreciate that you use this with DAC because I think that's a great group that's very diverse. And I'm looking forward to the results. And I also, can you clarify how they're going to seek this information? Because depending on what social media channel you're using, you're going to get a different results in the viewership. And so can you talk a little bit about the diverse options to seek the input?
The organic tool, basically, we can add any level of channels that we want. So if there is a specific channel that they haven't programmed in there, we could do that. It's taking from news accounts. It takes from if there's a Facebook group of concerned parents, we could throw that in there. You can basically load it with anything that you want. It comes preloaded by Zen City. They've done like sort of a survey of our community, and they've helped do that. We've added some other elements to it, some other folks that we want to be able to watch. And again, it also pulls from traditional media too. That's for the organic tool.
Okay, that was my question, because Facebook in general the user is over 50 and a different demographic than you would find other places. Do they target surveys? Do they Google target, like with media where people are scrolling their daily news feed, whatever that is?
Yeah, that's my understanding that they do. And again, as far as Facebook, it's Instagram, it's all major social media platforms, X, anything like that. It's pulling from those various feeds. So, for instance, the rezoning discussion, it's pulling from Facebook accounts. If it's on Instagram, it's pulling that. If it's mentioned in a news account, it's pulling that as well. So it pulls all that information in there, and it just helps us generally see what is the sentiment out there and helps us to gauge what some of the concerns are. The dashboard's very intricate. It shows like a word cloud, so you can see what common words are bubbling up in the conversation, just so you can get a sense if there's a particular trend or topic of interest that's out there, so you can kind of address it if need be.
Okay, thank you. I think my question with Google or those searches, the news media, so if they were searching, reading whatever they read daily, the placement of those surveys embedded in that is what I was asking.
I'd have to check and see.
Okay.
That's very specific. Let me check with them.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Sharpless?
So you're asking for feedback, and when I think of the pulse survey specifically, one thing that comes to mind is referendum. It talks about in here identifying public support or opposition for specific projects or initiative. That's the first thing that comes to my mind. And so I'm not telling you that's what it has to be used for or anything. I'm just saying, if you want feedback, that's my initial feedback when I first see this.
And in preparation for this meeting, I don't pretend to be in anybody's head, but I certainly know that's on your guys' mind. So I did talk with Mr. Green and just briefly mentioned that to him, that may be something that you would be interested in. I don't know how the limitations of what we can do when it comes to both discussing and exploring that topic from the district level, whether or not this could be used for that. But I did mention that to him, so if he wanted to explore it or research it, he could.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Fields?
I'm excited about this opportunity and the feedback that we're going to be getting from all over the place. My question is, how will we identify community groups, nonprofits? Are we getting information from United Way, or how are we going to do that?
I think with working with our strategic partnership arm, we'll go to those folks like chambers of commerce. We're going to invite folks from those various agencies directly to please fill out the form and to lock themselves down as a community partner and a community member. So I think it's leaning on our folks, our liaisons, who also are very familiar with our agencies too. But yes, we will specifically target them to please fill out. Do you want to?
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, it is going to be anonymous, though, so we won't know those specific groups if they're filling that out.
It's going to be what now?
Anonymous,
Okay.
yeah.
But I think to Ms. Fields' question, the question is, how are we identifying the potential community-based philanthropic groups to target? And the answer would be yes. We are going to we'll definitely go back to United Way because they keep the most comprehensive list of all of these organizations and non-for-profits. So we can definitely make sure that they receive it. But to Ms. Crowley's point, the responses will not be able to be sorted. Now, there is demographic data, though. And that's one of the reasons, going back a year ago when we adopted Zen City, one of the reasons that we went with them versus three other companies that we interviewed at the time was, number one, they had the ability, because it was AI intuitive, they were able to pull data for us and pull responses and classify it based off questions that we were currently talking. So even if someone doesn't respond to a survey in regards to a particular topic that the board may be discussing or have an interest in, they will use their AI tools to scan social media and pick up on offline kind of conversations, meaning they're not something that we're tagged in, but they're the conversation about Polk County Public Schools, about school safety, about transportation, that can come back to us. And so then, but with the surveys themselves, there is demographic data, because one of the things that was promised to us and we were able to see was we can actually sort that data by your district. So you could see how your stakeholders are responding to certain information, and then there's other demographic data that we can pull as needed, self-reported data. And they also had access to distribution groups that were well beyond the ones that we had. And that was our primary question was, we can only target surveys to the people who are in focus. That's it. That's our limitation, other than potentially other partnerships. How then do we tap into the other 90% of Polk County residents that have no touch point with public education? And they had the ability to tap into that as a resource. And so that was something, again, these were the primary concerns that we had and interest that we had when we made that selection. So Ms. Fields will be able to get a pretty comprehensive response.
Yeah, I'm not really concerned about the names. I'm just wanting to make sure that it's inclusive.
Yes, ma'am.
And then the other thing is making sure that the questions that we pose are simple and easy for anyone to understand and comprehend.
That's part of the reason we reached out to DAC after we went through and designed them with the committee. DAC obviously has a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of different experiences, and they kind of helped field test it, and they were able to give us suggestions on how to make some things more clear so that they would be better received when we launch.
Great, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. And part of what Zen City provides is they have a trained team who know how to write survey questions so that they're not leading questions. A lot of times we'll write a survey question and inadvertently, without knowing it, we've written it in a way that essentially leads the reader to give a response that we expect of them. They have tools and strategies and experts that prevent that. They also have a large repository of pre-populated questions that we can select from for various topics, not for every topic, but for a variety of topics. So it is a really good tool, and as we get more comfortable utilizing it, I think you'll see a larger frequency of data coming back to you, or being on our dashboard saying, hey, we asked this question, we wanted to know, here's your responses. I mean, that's good data for us to have on a regular, ongoing basis. So, yes, ma'am. That concludes the questions for the two of you. Thank you both very much. Board members, as I discussed, I'd like to go ahead and take some time here to address item.
Superintendent Hyde?
Sir.
Is it possible for us to take a short 10 to 15-minute break?
Sure.
Excellent. So I will, because that was a request, and so of other board members. So if we could, at this time, take a 15-minute break, that will put us back here at 2:20. We'll just say 2:20. Okay? All right. We're on a break. At this time, I would like to call this meeting back to order and turn it over to Superintendent Hyde to finish leading off our work session today.
Sir, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the board, as I stated, we have concluded the superintendent's report with the exception of my taking liberty to make sure that I provided you further information as far as item D, number 3. Board members, you will recall that on August 15th, I sent you correspondence. At the time, we had become aware that there were some contractual issues with speech services for many of our private care providers and our Catholic schools and others. And so based off of the allowance in the board policy, and again, I outlined all of this for you in that email. It is attached here for your reference again. I outlined that I would be using my authority to go ahead and authorize those contracts. They fell well below the established thresholds of my spending allowance. And so, but as a matter of transparency, made sure I included you on that. And the goal was to ensure that our students did not start the school year without those services in place. And at the end of the day, I did go ahead and ask that staff follow up. And so we did attach each of those contracts here for you. But board members, having heard no concerns at the time, as you know, I know Mr. Sharpless, you've been on the board now a couple of years, but board members who have been here throughout the entirety of my first 5 years here will tell you, I think this is the first time I've ever used my spending authority for contract purposes, because it's important to me that we maintain the integrity of that process. But when it came to being able to authorize services for our students, we want to make sure we took care of that. More importantly, though, issuing and approving those contracts is just one issue. The second issue really was, the primary focus was modifying the timelines to make sure that this gets approved well ahead of time and comes before the board for final authorization, and we don't find ourselves in a similar situation at the start of the upcoming school year. So that has already been addressed, and so we have modified all of our timelines and deliverables to ensure that that takes place by July rather than waiting for August approvals. So hopefully that explains. So, Ms. Miller.
I just want to say I appreciate this being addressed. This has been an issue. It was an issue previously in prior years, so the knowing that we'll have a plan now so this doesn't happen. We don't want all of our students in Polk County, they're all our kids. And to know that kids were waiting well into October to receive services in a private setting, we're not only obligated to move quickly on these, but I think when it was brought to our attention, we did move quickly on that. I did have a question because I haven't received it's been a few, I can't tell you the last time, and I'm sure it's been in our in our agenda items, but because we have a limit on what the superintendent can approve that's higher than most districts, we always received a quarterly report, and it's part of our policy. Is that something that we still receive or will be receiving?
I've never been asked in 5 years to provide that report. I've never been notified that report was an expectation. So I'm not sure what you're referring to, so I've never seen an example of it either.
Okay, I'll send the policy, and I apologize. We've had it in the past, and maybe if it's been 5 years, and that's on us for not asking. It's just good stewardship to, to follow through with what our policy states. But I'll send it. Thank you.
See no further questions or comments. At this time, we have annual contract renewals under $1 million. There are 4 items there. Ms. King. Yes, ma'am.
Vice Chairman Sharpless and board members. Thank you for your time this afternoon. You have in front of you the 4 contract recommendations that we are recommending you approve. And just to make it clear, other than one vendor, these are for 1 year only. Okay? The standard was a 3-year renewal that was offered at a flat rate. Did you have particular questions? Did you want me to cover these individually? What would be your preference?
I would encourage you to go through them individually and see if board members have.
Okay. All right, so the first one is review of the of Total Administrative Services Corporation. This is TASC. This is our vendor for the flexible spending accounts and COBRA administration. And we are recommending a 1-year renewal. Just so you know, I work closely with Avail on these contract renewals. I started kind of at the same time they were coming on board, but I did work closely with them on these. All of these contracts, you'll notice, in most cases, I did give you the year they started, and they have been here a long time. Okay. We had talked with the Health Strategy Committee about the need, obviously, to go out for the medical and pharmacy first and spend a lot of time on that, which we did. But the goal this coming year was to do all the other services. And so what you see here is a recommendation to renew this for actually 1 year. This was a piggyback on Brevard County that we had tagged on to in the past, back in 2013. And we did have one more additional year on this, but we didn't have a negotiated. We had to negotiate the fees. Okay, so we did that. And there was a slight increase, as no surprise to anyone here. Services and costs have gone up, so there was a slight increase here to that as well. I will say I've had my struggles with the FSA and COBRA administration, so I have wanted to bid this on numerous occasions. It's just been having the time to do that. So we will be seeking out a new vendor for this for 2027. Any questions on that? Okay, the next one.
Hang on,
I'm sorry.
Ms. Miller.
Do we have something in procedures that would help guide us in when these bids go out? Because not having time, I need to have a better explanation to the public.
Mr. Hyde has made it clear that most of our contracts are only for a 5-year period at the most. And so we will be working through the new fleet administrative program to be letting these additional RFPs. Because of the time required on that, we do have the option to have fleet run those for us, following the same administrative rules we would follow. So that's going to be staff recommendation will be to use fleet to help us with that.
Thank you.
Ms. Wyatt?
This is probably a more general question, but along the same lines as Ms. Miller, as we're looking at bidding out or doing RFPs for different contracts that have been longstanding, do we have a master list for the district of what years contracts are up for different departments and just where we can know what to expect and what's coming in any given year? Or is
I have to
that?
go back and reference the list that I've already been provided of contracted services. I requested the initiation date and the current expiration date. I don't know if I have the renewal terms for each one, but as we've looked to prioritize those to begin the RFP process, because obviously we can't bid out everything at the same time, I can look to see if we have that, so we can make a note of that.
It would just be nice to, and that's not necessarily just for the health insurance, though that is a big piece of it, but just to kind of see where we are on each of our contracts and what my assumption is that you're not going to try and start all of them, bidding them out this year, that you're going to do a slower roll into it. So
We
just
will.
kind of to put us on this is what it looks like for the foreseeable future would be helpful.
Yeah, trying to chunk those by department too, because it's not just a matter of managing the number of contracts, it's managing the number of contracts per department or per division, so that one is not overly burdened or tasked with, a fairly large, significant change in multiple areas. For example, just one of the ones we talk about most frequently is substitute services. The goal is not, I don't think that there's an expected outcome that we may change providers. I think the goal is to make sure that we're operating with a high level of fiduciary responsibility. And if our current provider is the most competitive provider and offers the best price point and ROI, then fantastic. But if not, we should be considering other options. And so we have established the expectation that we don't have these legacy renewals. Much to our benefit, though, regardless of the timeline on a contract, as far as its expectation, we do have exit clauses in all of our contracts. Should we get to a point where we want to accelerate the bidding for something that we currently have in place, we have that opportunity as well.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. No further questions. Go ahead, Ms. King.
Okay, thank you. The next renewal you'll see is for Aetna Resources for Living, our employee assistance program. This contract also has been around some time. This was originally Horizon Behavioral, if I remember, long before I was here. I did some research on that, but we do have that in place, and we did get a renewal for that as well. They were proposing a 3-year renewal, but again, because of the timing of the contract and needs to go out, we didn't commit to a 3-year renewal. We committed to a 1-year renewal. And you'll see the rates there. Just so you know, the district pays this expense. So this is paid under countywide as far as that service is provided. Let's see here, what else was important about that? We did negotiate, there were some services in there that we weren't using, so we did negotiate some of that to come back. What you saw common in all of these contracts was we were trying to find money for the contract effectuator. If you remember Vale's presentation, that's to be the person to come alongside my department, help with communications, problem solving with the employee, and a lot of those services. It's like what we had in the past, but much larger as far as responsibilities. They would be coming alongside with benefit focus. They'd be coming alongside on all of those processes, which is what I had, some of that I had in the past with Robinson Bush. So a lot of this was trying to find some money for those services to be provided, because that's going to be one of the first RFPs that we work on with Fleet, because we're eager to get that person in place to begin helping us with the next steps for next year. So you'll see we got a 1% credit back, and we'll be using that as part of the contract effectuation. And it was for some training services that we were not using.
Sorry, Ms. King, go ahead.
That's all right.
Ms. Wyatt.
Thank you. For this contract in particular, how are we advertising this to employees? Because this is something
we did
that's
quite a
come
bit.
up.
And actually, at Back to School, I did a whole thing on, we included the EAP. Ms. Hollis put together a whole PowerPoint, and we got permission from Mr. McNaughton to show that during the teacher workday. And I can tell you, went through it at the Back to School. We went through all of those benefits.
This is just a topic that our employees don't seem to know about overwhelmingly.
I can tell you, our utilization is higher than most districts.
Okay.
So
Well,
it is
depending on what
used.
most districts are, that may or may not be super comforting, but I would love to see us be able to better utilize, even just better message that it's available for employees, because I think that's something that we've talked a lot about.
Ms. Rouse, can we talk about adding this to the newsletter, the monthly newsletter? And we can make it a standing item under employee resources or something, just as a reminder.
It's
I know, like,
also,
this newsletter gets longer and longer after every meeting, but quite frankly, it's all hyperlinked, so I think if that's a need. The other thing, just to point out, if I may, we should not, and we do not solely rely on employees self-advocating for the resource, which is why our administrators and others should be talking to them and making referrals. And I don't mean referrals outside of the employee. I mean referrals saying, hey, you seem to be struggling, or the employee discloses something of a personal nature to the administrator. The administrator then knows, hey, we have EAP. Do you need that? They can put them in touch with RISC. They can put them in touch with others. So even outside of employees searching through the benefits package,
Right.
it should be at the forefront with our administrators, and we can make sure we highlight that again at the monthly principals and AP meetings to make sure that that's happening. There's also a lot of informal counseling that happens when our staff will visit with school counselors, or they'll visit with the school nurse. And so we can make sure that we have Audrey Kelly and others touch on that as well, that, hey, keep reminding. I don't know that we have the handouts anymore. I don't think we print out the trifolds for EAP.
We do have cards available.
We do, okay.
We do have pocket cards available. And also, I emphasize too, the manager, there's a manager area, Jennifer, that I think is a great help. New administrators, and also gives them some areas for problem solving as well with their teams. So.
And Ms. Collins or or Jason, and I know Shay's not in here, the back of the employee IDs, is there still space that we could add something for EAP on the back of the employee ID? I'm sorry, what?
I was joking. I said we did really tiny print. That may be a good idea.
Well, we added the sticker for the QR code. I wonder if we can put something else in there. I don't know. We can talk about it. Sorry, shouldn't have this discussion right here, but we will find other means to make sure employees are aware.
I mean, realistically, this is probably more important than knowing it's $10 if you lose it. It's just my my thought. But I just, we've had conversations even with Hazel Health and things like that of what do we offer our staff, and I think this is a great resource that people don't know is out there. That would be silly for us to not push more to that are looking for those.
We'll make a note to make sure we include it in the regular updates of the monthly newsletters, but we'll find other strategies and bring those back to the board at a public meeting. I'm not just going to put it in an email. I think it needs to be discussed openly, so.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Miller?
Thanks. And this is the one thing that, Ms. King, that I mentioned in the committee meeting, and I know you were working on it. This could be done, I would like to see this done in a quick video. It could lead our meetings here. We need to show, because this is not only available for employees, but it's also their families. And I get a lot of calls mainly about our youth, and the employees do not know that this is available. And I'm not really concerned with stats if I'm hearing a majority of my staff say, I did not know this was available to me. So we have to look at messaging this. A quick video on how to access it, I think would be helpful, even if it's a video that you record yourself in some kind of Zoom meeting, accessing it, that we can share. So on public, I know our public relations department could do a fantastic in-person video, but I also know they're very busy. I just think this is one area. It's a great benefit to our staff. That's another reason I asked for our new teachers to go back to an in-person training, because I think they need to hear this as they enter, and if that can filter through to the schools. But also the schools, they get a lot of information. This needs to be high priority for them to share. A lot of our information, unfortunately, our principals are very busy and it stops at their email. But this is something, even working with PEA to get out through their channels, it needs their mental health is a priority, and I think this being a service to them, we would see a higher utilization if they understood how to access it. Thank you.
Ms. Fields?
I think we need to get away from acronyms and say what the program is, because EAP, a lot of people might not even know what that is. And so if it's employee assistance program or something else.
Yes, ma'am.
Agreed.
No, that's, well, we might be able to come up with something more appropriate.
I think the biggest thing for me is just getting rid of the acronym and making sure that they know that this is for them.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Sharpless?
I'm going to sound like a repeat here, but I just got to tell you how important this is and how critical it is. It's something that I am glad to hear that we have a higher utilization rates than other districts. I mean, that is a good thing. That our employees are, the ones that know about it are taking advantage of it, and that's good. I can tell you personally from my other employment, I've used an EAP before, and I can tell you it's employee assistance program, Mrs. Fields. You're welcome. And it helped me. It helped me because I was going through some tough times after my friend passed away. And so this is critical for, and mental health. When I was at the state of the county, that's something that is, it's a big thing right now. And so I just think it's important for, I'm echoing the other board members that our employees know about it. And the more we talk about different ways that we're advertising it, and the more we can just get it out there, the better. So thank you.
Well, we can certainly, I know Ms. Hollis is making notes, so we can certainly work on that. And I do agree. I remember one night having a crisis at night. It's been some time ago, thank God, but I remember thinking I had to call the EAP because I didn't know what to do. And it was a family member, and it was very serious, and I was very concerned and, just like you say, very stressed about it. And I knew I had to get some help with it. So I called the EAP, and I did benefits for a living, and I told them, I said, I didn't think I'd ever be the one calling the EAP, but in this situation, I really had something that was very serious that happened, and it was quickly. So they were great support. All right, the next one is the standard, and that's our group term and accidental death and dismemberment policy, as well as they offer our short-term and long-term disability insurance policies. So the standard has been with us since about, looks like 2016, and they did propose a 3-year rate hold. Out of that, we were able to negotiate based on their margins and what they're earning. I worked closely with the Vail on this. We were able to negotiate a 7.5% commission to be paid out of that, okay, to our contract effectuator. So again, all of these funds are going to be coming to the district to be paid out to another vendor to help provide services to our employees. And that will include, one of the things on the on the scope of services is days and office hours, like for employees, and they have questions or issues they need help with. They would actually have somebody to help them solve that. Like you see here, I mean, the Standard has been a great partner for a number of years with us. They continue to be a good partner, so that is something we are looking to continue. We will be checking on the rates, obviously services, things of that nature, but nothing Avail saw was out of concern as far as what we were offering here. Any questions on that renewal? Okay, the next one is group dental insurance with Delta Dental. We have been with Delta Dental also, I think, since 2016, according to my records. And we were up for renewal, so we weren't anticipating renewing this contract. But due to the timing of bringing Avail on board and the consultants and the timing of open enrollment, we saw it necessary to go back to them to negotiate something. So we did that, and we were able to negotiate. It will be an increase in the rates. As you know, dentists, I tell you, they make a lot of money, and it's no different in Polk County than it is anywhere else, and it's a struggle trying to get dentists in networks. Normally they do that when they're just starting their practice, so they can get a following, more or less, but it is a struggle to get them to join networks. So what we were doing is they agreed to pay a 7.5% commission to the future contract effectuator. And that what we did, the district was getting some monies for enrollment help, more or less. Like I was getting 1% from Delta. So what I did is I'm converting all of that to the contract effectuator. So no monies are staying within my budget that are not going back out to help employees. And basically, the only reason I kept it in the past is we were the one, through Benefit Focus, providing a lot of those services for help as far as enrollment. Let's see. So this will be, this is going to be basically a net increase of 6.78%, with the balance going through contract to the contract effectuator. And you do have the rates in front of you there. And again, 1-year renewal. We are going out to bid on this, so we'll see what else is in the marketplace as far as plan design, and that will be going through your Health Strategy Committee, Superintendent, and they'll be bringing recommendations forward.
Correct.
As far as scopes, but more or less we're going to look to use Fleet for these procurement services just because of the bandwidth available, right? So, because I'll have likely 4 or 5 bids going out this year. So using Fleet and using that resource and using my own committee to help weigh in on scope of services, things of that nature, but Fleet would ultimately be doing the procurement on behalf of the school board. So that's going to be a great resource for us to help us.
Ms. Miller?
So you're saying that the only way they would do that annual renewal is with a 6% increase?
Yes, that's correct.
Was that because it was a short-term renewal?
It is a short-term renewal, and they were trying to get us to negotiate a longer one, but we just weren't comfortable doing that with where we were right now without checking the market. We didn't want to tie up any agreements as far as additional funds for a longer contract, and they were kind of tying us to that with their proposal. So,
And there's a strong feeling, Ms. Miller and board members, that there are more competitive options.
Yes,
They'll provide,
right.
if not the same quality, maybe even a better quality of supports for our
Could be,
employees.
yeah.
Which is why we were fairly confident just to go for a 1-year extension,
Mm-hmm.
even with the cost increase. So that's why the recommendation is there. Ms. Fields?
I want to commend Ms. Linda and her team and the Health Strategy Committee. Superintendent Hyde has been attending meetings as well, and I think they're coming along quite well. And the consultant that we now have in place, I think that was a great move on our part. So I think that we're going to see some positive results, in my opinion, from that. I don't know how Superintendent Hyde feels, but that's my feelings on it.
I definitely think it's getting better. I think there was some question at a recent meeting where it was asked, how is this different than the other insurance committee meeting, because they were getting the same information. But I think you addressed it, because we all have to start out with a baseline level of knowledge before we can start to explore. Like, the way I perceive the superintendent's committee is, we're really the research arm that makes a recommendation to the other committees and subsequently to board members. What other options are out there? What haven't we thought of? What can we explore? Whether we choose to pursue one of those, obviously, ultimately falls to the board and to our collective bargaining groups. But at the end of the day, at least we can say we tried and that we did our due diligence. So I think it's definitely getting better. I think Avail has proven to be an incredible thought partner, and they've started to fit in very well. And much like Ms. King said, in a year where you're looking at multiple contracts, it's nice to have that partner, that thought partner, to assist us with that, because their bandwidth and their knowledge about across the state through Fleet and others, as what other districts are doing, including similarly sized districts, and more large districts are joining Fleet, which is good news. So that gives us procurement power and across the state, especially when you get 2 or 3 large urban districts in there. So I think we're headed in the right direction. So thank you for the feedback and the positive comments, Ms. Fields. Ms. King, that concludes. There are no further questions or comments. Thank you to you and your team. Appreciate it. Board members, the last remaining items are informational items only, as typical: donation report, grants management report, private school contracts for speech and tutoring services, which I already addressed, and I will turn it over to the Vice Chair.
Thank you, Superintendent. Thank you, Superintendent and board members. If we could at this time, I would like to go over our agenda for this evening. So I'm going to give you a moment to open up our agenda. Okay, are there any questions on sections? We're going to go through section by section, or groups of sections, A through E. Any questions on sections A through E? No. How about F through K? Board Member Wyatt, you're recognized.
Thank you. On K4, I know we talked about this a little bit last time with concurrency, but I just want to note we're releasing them because they have paid for it. That's because they paid for the elementary seats. As soon as we can get adjacency out of our interlocal agreement, they will have had to have paid a lot more for the middle and high school seats that right now is in adjacency. So just a friendly little reminder.
And that draft version has been going back and forth amongst our staff, and it will be sent over to the county probably by midweek next week, if we're on pace. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
All right, seeing no others. Now we're going to go through sections L through N. L through N. All right, now how about sections O through T? O through T. Seeing no one, we have our action agenda. We have both the turnaround plan, step 1 and step 2 on our agenda. Any discussion? No? Okay, then we're going to go down to the public hearing, items V1, V2, and V3. Board Member Wyatt.
Thank you. For V1, student code of conduct, I know we talked a little bit about, and just kidding, I'm looking at the wrong document. Never mind. I'll bring you back that question later. It's not what I thought it was.
No.
Sorry.
All right. Anyone else on our public hearing? No. Then we have our superintendent's report. Superintendent, you have a report for tonight?
Yes, I do, sir.
Excellent. Then we have Mr. Green. Looks like you have something for us. Excellent. Mrs. Matthews, you have anything for tonight? All right, thank you. And then we will wrap up with our comments, our board member comments, as well as public comment. Are there any other questions on the agenda for tonight's meeting? All right. Seeing none, we can go back to our work session. And we have board member comments right now. Do we have any committee or liaison updates? I would like to take a privilege of starting out, if that's okay with the board. I serve as the board representative for junior achievement. And I've had some conversations here recently with Ms. Shauna Dykes, and it's an amazing organization, and I really respect them a lot. And I've tried to work through my personal work schedule, and it's been difficult to make meetings, to say the least, for me. And some of these things are, having happen, quick turnarounds and things like that. And it's just hard for me to make some of these meetings. And so I'm looking for suggestions for the board. I actually really value their work a lot and what they do. One suggestion that there's a few different ways we can handle this. I could step down as the representative. I mean, we're in September. We could also potentially appoint an alternate to serve when I can't make it there. But I'm going, and again, we're not doing any official business. I just am looking for feedback from my fellow board members on how they think that we should proceed with this. Good. The meetings are generally on Fridays, but sometimes we, have like an event last week on a Wednesday. And normally they're Friday mornings for the most part.
I've served with junior achievement in the past and would love to be able to do whatever I can to support. So whatever that looks like, I'm happy to assist if needed.
Okay.
I appreciate you recognizing that as much as you care for the organization, it's probably good to have someone able to make the meetings. I think an alternate is a good idea in case you can make it sometimes.
Okay.
That I have to recuse myself from that because I'm now employed with junior achievement.
Okay.
It was quick. Okay.
Okay, so we can't take any official action right now, but is it possible that we could add this as a agended item for tonight in the action agenda? Is it possible that we could do that or not?
They've
Let me talk about that with Mr. Green during.
Okay.
There may be an allowance for it as an emergency item because you can't attend.
Yeah.
And so if there's an allowance for that, for a committee to be reassigned, I don't see that would be an issue, but
It is, the next meeting's the beginning of October, so.
so we have a workshop. Although there's been some discussion about adding a special meeting to the end of that workshop for the purposes of addressing a matter that's before the board. Let Mr. Green and I research it in the intermission, and if we can bring it back, we're happy to do so. And if not, we could probably address it at that time if the board consensus is that that's a good meeting for everyone. And that would get it done before that meeting takes place. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, thank you. And outside of that, my duties with FSBA, just want to let you all know that in October, we are going to have a Board of Directors leadership meeting for FSBA, and we're going to be talking about our strategic plan. And so if there's any, I know there was a survey that was sent out to all FSBA members about the strategic plan that hopefully you were able to give some input on if it was through email. But if not, certainly you reach out to Andrea Messina or Dr. Demetrius Rice, who is leading that. He's leading that from a staff's perspective. So anyhow, just some important work's going to be happening in October for FSBA as well. And that's all I have. Board Member Wyatt?
Thank you. I also appreciate, as Ms. Miller said, you're recognizing that that's such an important relationship with junior achievement and making sure that we have a representative there. I was thrilled a few years ago when we made it concrete that there was a representative from this board, because I served for a long time just as a community member. But I do think it brings up a bigger question too, with Mr. Nolte's passing. Do we know what committees he was serving on, and have we made arrangements to make sure that there's somebody filling those vacancies? And is that something that we need to look at in the coming weeks? I don't know what.
Dr. Allen, attention.
Mhm.
He's aware of it, so he's supposed to be working on it.
Okay. Is there anything pertinent, if we're not meeting again until end of October, is there anything we need to make sure is covered? Or just
Event-wise?
for any committees that he was
Oh.
serving
He's
on?
only on 2, and I think 1 is covered.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there any other committee or liaison updates? All right. With no further business to come before the board, this meeting is adjourned.